Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members of the media. I've joined you this afternoon to just make one announcement, and that announcement is that the parliamentary recess ends on the 9th of September. Parliament will resume on that day, and I think that it is time that we get back to the House and continue the business as we had been before the recess. But I just want to address for the public the matter of my physical well-being, which seems to have attracted a lot of valuable attention in the recent days. And I do so against the background that it was never my intention or expectation that what in effect was fairly standard procedures would have been so exciting and excitably dealt with in my absence. You may recall that on my return from one of those trips I did recently in speaking to the public, I think it was at the Women's League function somewhere in the presence of the media, I did indicate some of my plans for the parliamentary recess. It's important for one to remember that, like teachers, the parliament goes on recess in a specific period during the year, July into August. And it is during that period that members of parliament, particularly those members who have families and small children, would take some vacation away from the hurly-burly of the normal life that we lead. As Prime Minister, it is my duty, and I've done so, to rotate persons going out of the jurisdiction. Some members may go abroad with their families, taking a week, half a week, 10 days, and I have to juggle that to ensure that everybody doesn't rush out and leave the country. So some persons go and come back, and as they go and come back, at the end of the recess period, a fair portion of the members of parliament, especially the ministers, would have had the opportunity for doing the needful for themselves and for their families, to have taken a break from the duties that we carry out. I do so against the background that I genuinely believe and have operated on the basis that vacation is an integral part of the foundation for good performance. And that is why terms and conditions for employment of all employees of state and others in the private sector include some element of vacation. It's there, written into the contracts and written into the terms of even the lowly paid or the highly paid person. And that being said, in managing the affairs of state, the public service in particular, I've had to take steps to prevent the excessive accumulation of leave by persons who are entitled to leave. Because it is my approach in managing public affairs that leave is valuable to the person who earned the leave, and most valuable when the person takes that leave and goes out to be refreshed and to come back reinvigorated to ensure that the employer, mainly the public who hires them, gets the best of the employee. There's another side to leave too, that if people don't go on leave, it has a negative effect on the succession planning of the organization. Because when people in position accumulate excessive amounts of leave, it prevents others from having the opportunity to act in those positions and to learn the job and to be given the opportunity for short periods to carry out the responsibilities of those positions. And that's an integral part in developing your human capital in any organization. That A goes on leave, B acts, and B gets the experience. So when A eventually, inevitably has to go, B is not a brand new shilling in the coffer. So leave is important. What I met when I came in as Prime Minister was a situation where at the level of permanent secretaries and many other very senior persons, it appears as though leave was either not taken or sparingly taken. And persons were, as a matter of course, and I may say of a right, were accumulating huge amounts of leave, and then you hear somebody has 2 years leave and a year and a half leave and so on and so on. Some person has 500 days leave. That is an arrangement of management which I do not subscribe to. And I would have told you, the media, at an earlier time, that what I did as Prime Minister was to instruct and effect that as of January 1st, 2016, that kind of accumulation of leave would not be encouraged, and persons who had been building up leaving that way had to do certain responses, including going on early retirement, well, pre-retirement leave earlier than they had planned and so on. So this is all a management arrangement which I had stood by and was familiar. In my own case, it applies, because I don't ask people to do what I don't intend to do for myself. So when it was time, the first parliamentary recess to take place during this term, after a long period of campaigning, we came out of three elections, I think, the THA election, the local government election, a series. As opposition leader, I have pretty much been going non-stop for 2 years. And then you won the election in September, and you came straight into the budget and to the government, and then the parliament goes on recess. And then I see persons asking or taking the position as to whether it was appropriate and when was a good time for the Prime Minister or parliamentarians or the Prime Minister to go and leave. Well, I can say, if there's any time that the Prime Minister could go and leave, the best time would be when the Parliament is on recess, because there's no other time that is less demanding than that period, and that's what the recess is for, so that persons who are engaged in that business could get some vacation. The job carries a vacation of 30 days. I went on vacation. I indicated that, and I volunteered that information, that I would be leaving the country on the 4th of August, and I would return on the 15th of August. And I went further. I indicated that during that 10-day period, I would take the opportunity to have some medical examinations done abroad, and in between the examinations, I would take some days of vacation. I thought that was pretty clear and straightforward English, and also, for me, it was a fairly normal arrangement, in that for the last 25 years or so, I have been trying to take good care of myself. I do not begin to take good care of myself as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Because you see, we all get older every day. And one of the things that I would like to advocate to the people of Trinidad and Tobago as part of government policy and part of my own personal policy is that management of the person, particularly where health is concerned, is a major responsibility of the individual. Unfortunately, I have practiced that over my lifetime. So in the recent 25 years or so, I have very regularly undergone physical checks. I have doctors I go to in Trinidad and Tobago, and I have doctors I go to abroad, and together they have my record, and they guide and advise me as I get older. But there's something else I want to raise, not just generically, something specifically. We say here in Trinidad and Tobago as a government that we want to make decisions based on data. Talk about data-driven policy making. Well, that can come down to the personal level. Because as a person in Trinidad and Tobago, many years ago, I might say decades ago, the advice that I've been getting, and I think that advice is available to a large number of you, is that the science data shows that African men outside of Africa have a very high incidence of prostate cancer. And in that cohort, Trinidad and Tobago in particular, seems to have an unusually high occurrence. That being known to us, and in some instances down to the family level, any man, young man, growing up in this society, being of Afro basis, origin, and the science indicating that, would want to be interested in that information. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, I don't think what I've just said is news. Because many of you know that our men know that. But there are many men in this country who will not subject themselves to the medical examination that is required to monitor their own health and well-being where prostate cancer is concerned. And very many of them end up in situations where the disease would have progressed beyond significant assistance. These are the facts of our health conditions. So I know that. So many, many years ago, one of the things that I would do is frequently, annually sometimes, get myself examined, so that in the event that as I progress through life, that I happen to come upon such a disease, that I give my doctors and myself the best chance to respond. And today, I hold that out to all the men in Trinidad and Tobago, to not be so macho that you do not want to subject yourself to that particular bit of scientific data, which requires you to get yourself examined on a regular basis once you pass age 40. Just to monitor yourself, so that in the event that there are changes to your body, you will be in the best position to get the best medical care, either at home or abroad, and give yourself the best chance to survive a very crippling disease. So over the years, I've done that, and I do that for a specific purpose. The purpose being that if I see any change in my body, I will benefit from what I've just said, which is early detection and, of course, procedures which might be available in the response technology. And it's against that background that as I was planning to take a week's vacation, I said I had gone to my local doctors. I hadn't been last year because last year was hectic politics and the half of the previous year and so on. But I did keep my disciplined approach, go and get myself checked. And having gone, my local doctors saw something which was of interest to them. That was communicated to my foreign doctors, and they said, we will examine further. And I made that information available to the public. And I dare say, when I left this country, there was no other information available. And no further information would be available until the tests were done. And I returned to the country on Tuesday morning at 5 o'clock, and today, Thursday, I'm here. The tests would have been done. I spoke to the media. I indicated when I was going into the clinic. And I did indicate to you that having gone into the clinic, in between I'll take some vacation. That had generated a lot of discourse in some quarters, whether I should have vacation or not, and so on and so on. But the bottom line is, the tests have been done. And today I'm pleased to announce that whatever concerns I might have had, in the way I might have had them, as part of the ongoing arrangement of me monitoring my health, I'm pleased to announce that my doctors have pronounced me in good health. And I have no ailment, I have no symptoms which can prevent me at this point in time from conducting the duties to which I have been assigned in Trinidad and Tobago. But I want to reiterate, for men in Trinidad and Tobago, especially men of African heritage, the science shows that we have this propensity to have a very high frequency of prostate cancer, and the response to it is to get yourself examined regularly after a certain age. One can choose to do it or not do it. That's entirely personal. Now, on the matter of who should do it, to you as a patient, that is an entirely personal matter, regardless of what office you hold. The choosing of a doctor for a citizen is entirely personal. And of course, the information supplied to you as an individual and to me, first and foremost as an individual, concerned about my personal health, Prime Minister or no Prime Minister, the conversation between me and my doctor is private and would be made public only insofar as it is available to the public, so that the public can understand whether I am in a position to continue to discharge my duties. As I left this country on August 4th, no such situation existed. And throughout, I read with great interest what was said and from what quarters they came. And I think this is a good opportunity for me to say it was a learning experience, because I always maintained in this political arena in which I perform that I have a genuine belief that the vast majority of people in Trinidad and Tobago are decent, right-thinking people who wish well for all of us. And having gone abroad and the press having made such an exciting number of pages of script about my situation, I discovered that I was completely correct in assessing the national population. I was overwhelmed by the amount of good wishes and prayers directed at me and my family in a situation where I was going to have medical tests done. Unfortunately, there were some persons who had the results before the doctor, and they were able to diagnose ailments of, how should I put it, more dire than I would have wished on myself. But I want to thank all those persons who took the time to communicate with me or to indicate and to participate in all these sending of good wishes. Your efforts, your thoughts, and your prayers were all very well appreciated by me and my family. And it was good to be relieved after the tests were done to show that after this year's tests, I had nothing to worry about. And I will continue to monitor myself as we go forward, because it's a requirement under the circumstances. Our men, like me in Trinidad and Tobago, there are too many of us who I've heard said that they will not subject themselves to the indignity of a prostate examination. That, I think, has no place in a situation where it could be life and death if you are too late in the discovery. Having gone to do my tests, I did a whole range of tests because it is an opportunity to use the technology and the experience available to me. I did a number of other tests. And may I say that this whole question of the incidence of prostate cancer among our population, the Afro-based population, the science also tends to indicate that it's a diet-driven thing. A lot of it is driven by the Western diet, Caribbean, West African diet. Because Africans in Africa, who are Africans like us by origin, have a different diet. And they do not show the level of prostate cancer incidence as we have. So the experts in medicine are indicating to us that we could also help ourselves by the diet that we participate in. And I like to believe that I'm a disciplined person. Over the years, I've always tried to control my intake, both in terms of quality and quantity. And also, added to that, is a requirement for certain kind for exercise to be an integral part of our activity. And I've tried to do that as part of my daily discipline. So these are things that I would advocate that as a population, if nothing comes out of the recent week of my absence and my statements of going to get medically examined, if nothing comes out of it, I would like the whole issue of men having themselves examined as I do and have done for many years, so that in the event that your body reacts in a certain way, you give yourself the best chance. There was also something that was raised about whether, in fact, I as Prime Minister should have gone abroad for medical attention. I address this only in so far as to say that there are some things in life that will remain personal to you. I have had medical attention in California for 20-odd years. And the doctors I go to out there, doctors who either refer me or treat me out there, are people who have my record for 25 years. So I don't find it unusual, and I would find it unusual if I am able to go, that I do not make use of the path that I've laid over the decades. I didn't begin to examine and to monitor myself when I became Prime Minister or when I became a minister. I've been doing this for a long time in recognition of the fact that personal responsibility and personal behavior and personal discipline could assist in maintaining a certain quality of life and a certain level of health. And I would like to advocate that. Of course, I must express my grave disappointment with one of our national newspapers, who in this scenario of a simple test being a simple statement coming from my office, which issued a statement, and from me personally, not seeking to hide anything, because there's nothing to hide. If there's something private that I ought to remain private, it remains private, with respect to my health. But there's nothing to hide. I was the one who indicated I would be doing some tests. And until the tests are done, there's no diagnosis. But then, of course, I look at the national newspaper, and on the front page, I must express my disappointment to the Express, which I read every day, and would like to believe that a certain level of responsibility exists in the editorial room, where on the front page of the Express you publish rumor about my health and throat cancer coming from somebody who knows absolutely nothing about me. A person who is not a doctor, a person who clearly is musing and speculating on the worst, and that finds itself on the front page of the newspaper, creating unnecessary trepidation in certain quarters. People who would wish me well and would wish the country well. I think it ought not to have been like that, because rumor has its place. And it is not for me to tell the Express how to publish or what to publish. But I do think that we're going down a very difficult road where rumor could find itself on the front page, knowingly being rumor, but managing to find itself on the front page of the paper as, an explanation for a situation which didn't really exist as far as I'm concerned. Because until the tests were done, there was nothing to report. I will continue to monitor my diet in a disciplined way. I will continue to examine myself and subject myself to my doctors both here and abroad to give myself the best chance to preserve my good health for as long as possible. We all know that with age, certain things will happen, and you would from time to time not be as young as you used to be. And there are certain interventions that might be required, but we give ourselves the best chance if we are able to monitor on a regular basis how our bodies are functioning. I'm no different, even though I'm the only Prime Minister in Trinidad and Tobago. If there are any questions, I will answer reasonable questions at this time.
Prime Minister Jules Brown from TV6 News. the conversation that was generated by your announcement that you would be undergoing medical tests abroad has raised the question of whether or not those who hold the office you hold, who are contesting that office and election, should be more forthcoming about issues concerning their health. Do you think that that is something that should be part of the political discourse?
Well, I don't know what you mean by being more forthcoming. I mean, I was as forthcoming as any person could be, unless you are asking, unless you tell me specifically what you want to be told to you. I can't really answer your question because I was as forthcoming as I could possibly be. I said I am going away for this 10-day period. I will have a few days vacation. I will go to have medical examination done during that period. I had medical examination done in Trinidad. My doctors saw something of interest and would want to examine it further, and I will do that. What more can I tell the public? How much more forthcoming could I have been?
I was discussing the issue on a wider scale.
Well, I can't discuss it on a wider scale because... of what?
In the context, in Jamaica, for example, Prime Minister Holness, while he was campaigning, said he would reveal his financial and medical records. He has revealed his financials, but has not revealed his medical records.
Well,
that is something
I don't know why Mr. Holness said he was going to reveal his medical records. Maybe he knew there was something in his medical records that should form part of his election campaign. I know no such thing. What I can tell you is that my medical records in Trinidad and Tobago, in hands of any doctor, is a private matter. And I expect that any doctor I go to in Trinidad and Tobago, Prime Minister or not Prime Minister, that my doctor will treat my record and all citizens' records are private. However, as Prime Minister, if there is a medical situation which requires the public being informed of my condition insofar as it affects my ability to function, well, then the public ought to know. And that is the context in which private and public should cross.
Mr. Prime Minister, we'll come back to Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much.
Certainly, given the fact that you have advised about the dangers, the critical nature of this prostate cancer issue, does your government have any kind of plan to ensure that our health institutions are in a position to treat with men seeking such a public service? One recognizes, of course, that if you have to do it privately, the cost may be prohibitive or a little too much.
I am sure that the public system has the wherewithal to do that, but that is not the real problem. The real problem is men subjecting themselves to the examination. So we'll cross that hurdle first. That is where the problem really lies.
Do you think now that you have, given this highlight as you have, that there may be a change of thinking?
I sincerely hope so. You know, I'm glad you raised that. You know, I had a very close friend in the political arena who passed away not too long ago from a disease that requires this kind of examination. It wasn't colon cancer, it wasn't prostate, but it was associated. And I visited him towards the end of his days, because we were very good friends throughout. And I said to him what I just said to the public, that I do this examination regularly because I understand what the disease is and how early detection can give you a fighting chance. And I said to him in great earnestness, you know, maybe if you were examining yourself early on, we might have detected this earlier and would have given you a chance to fight better and or to be detected earlier, because these particular diseases benefit from early detection. And even at that stage, he said to me, nah, no man ain't digging up my bottom like that. And I couldn't believe it, because it was a case of life and death. But he was so macho that he was not prepared to subject himself to the tests, the physical tests. Nowadays, the tests are done in a variety of ways. And I simply would want to say that the education and the science should form part of our response to these ailments.
This one is about rumor or reality?
I'm not dealing in rumor.
The children's hospital.
I'm not dealing in rumor.
Yes, I will have expanded that one.
Right.
The matter of the children's hospital at Cuba. What is the latest position with respect to?
Well, the last information I had, you may recall, on numerous occasions, the opposition asking the government or demanding that the government open the hospital. I was advised recently that, I think it might have been about 2 weeks ago, the contractor who built that hospital has finally handed over the hospital to the government. What that means is all that has been said and done before, including the opening for the last election, the demands in the parliament, the accusations of racism against my government, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has only received that hospital about 2 weeks ago. It is now for the government to decide how we proceed to bring it into the national health grid.
Prime
Yes.
Minister, I just wanted to go back to a point my colleague had raised, Jewel, and to ask specifically whether or not maybe in the future going forward, prime ministerial candidates should either tell the population or their physicians should tell the population whether they're medically fit before they assume office.
I don't want to speak for other prime ministers, I speak for myself. I think the population needs to know that, because if you're choosing someone to run the country, you'd want to know. But that issue didn't arise today. I am in office now, and this is my story, and I'm talking to you as one citizen to another. We've had situations in this country where prime ministers have gone abroad and got themselves involved in very, very serious medical intervention, and the country was told after that A was not A, it was really B. We've had prime ministers who were in the kitchen cooking and 2 cans of peas fell on their feet and they had to be hospitalized because the feet were swollen. These are things that are, our experience. It's against that background and that knowledge that I volunteered, the information I volunteered in July, that I will be traveling in August during the recess. And I have had no reason to think that a person who is running for office as the leader of a party and aspiring to become prime minister would not want the population to know whether they're physically fit. But physical fitness may not mean mental fitness. There was an American president who operated out of a wheelchair, but he was one of the best presidents the Americans have ever had. So the ability to run 100 yards in 2 minutes may be fitness for some. But if there is a problem which will impact upon one's ability to function, then the population ought to know. But then that does not mean that you need to, I must tell you what my doctor and I talk about, and my personal files must become your front page. I still expect that as I serve as Prime Minister, there's some element of privacy and dignity in this whole matter of personal health. So I am with me, it's on the table. I will continue to examine myself. I can tell you now that based on the last examination I had last Monday, my doctors have said they want to see me again in about 9 to 12 months. And they will see me, God willing, because I will continue to do what I've done for the last 25 years, which is to have myself regularly checked by doctors so that in the event that I have something to deal with, it can be dealt with as early as possible. That's how I organize my life. And I offer that to you.
You said the conversation between your doctor and you will be kept private, but I'm wondering whether or not you would be willing to go one step further and say what was the change that local doctors saw that prompted overseas tests?
You know, there's a test, well, ladies won't know this, the men would know that. There's a test, there's something called the PSA test, right? An antigen in your blood that you can have a blood test to see what your PSA is. You know, like how you have a credit score, those of you who spend money. And you younger men may not know that, but as you get beyond 40, age 40, 45, thereabouts, you can do that test, and depending on what your PSA score is, there's a lower limit and an upper limit. like in most of these blood test things where at the upper limit, it's normal to be within that range. And if your score is around the upper limit or it crosses the upper limit, it could be an indication that something unusual is happening. So that is what happened locally with me, that I was in that area of the higher limit after a period of years of being somewhere else, and therefore the responsible doctors decided that it needed to be looked at further to see what it may portend. Unfortunately, there were persons who were better than my doctors, and they were able to see well beyond and before the test was done and knew what it was and went off on tangents, upsetting the public. You know, but there's nothing that a drink of rum can't fix in some quarters. But, you know, I go into this discussion not only about myself, but I think the public, this area of public health is an area that we need to focus on, because so many men have demised on the basis, on the fact that they had not got themselves observed early enough to be able to get the benefit of the best treatment. Much of it available locally.
Okay, Minister, just picking up on something you said that the doctors will want to see you in the next 9 months, just as part of a normal follow-up or for any other reason?
Normal follow-up, but of course, you know, the human body is a very complex organ, and there are days when some things are working fine. I have, you know, I have subjected myself to this regime for years. As a matter of fact, in terms of going abroad, the first serious medical procedure I ever had done, was done abroad, because one of these examinations determined that I could have been improved by an intervention, and it was done. I went to do this process, and now what I'm going to do, and I would share this with the public, is that insofar as I'm advised now that diet is an integral part of the management of these and similar kinds of disease and cardiovascular arrangements, I subject myself now to an improved arrangement in my diet so as to get the benefit of that. I've always tried to do that, but I'm being told now that it's part of the medical package, that you manage yourself better with a better diet, especially as at my age and as you get older. And I will be disciplined enough to do that. Nothing new. And whether I'm Prime Minister or not, I'll try to do that, because there's benefit in that, in terms of managing one's health. And personal responsibility for your health, taking responsibility for your health, is one of the things that every citizen could do to help this country. Because, you know, the cost of managing advanced ailment or preventable diseases could be phenomenal. And it should be an objective of the national health effort to manage health better at the individual level, man, woman, or child, so as not to have to carry the cost of the alternative.
Just to revisit a question that Ray had asked you earlier, as Prime Minister, you did say that even before you had been going abroad for about the past 20 years in California and the way medical tests. But is it that, or are you in a position now to look at the health system to see whether or not the tests you've been undergoing could be available in Trinidad and Tobago for those who may not be able to afford it?
And as I said, most of it, or much of it is. I don't expect that everything that's available abroad will be available here. Healthcare is expensive. Equipment is expensive. Experience is also very valuable. And what I treasure most in these kinds of things is the experience of persons who are experts in the area. And we do have some local experts, and they too acknowledge that they are foreign experts. The equipment we use here locally come from abroad, and of course those abroad who use them are a little more experienced than people here and so on. But our health system is not to be sneezed at. And I subject myself to it on a very regular basis. And there's one final point I want to touch on, just again for the benefit of the public, and that is, you see, when you go through this political arena, nobody stays in it forever. You get out of it feet first, or head first. And I'm always aware of that. And I'm always aware that as I spend such a long time in the political arena, with every passing day, with every passing year, that I give up so much of my family life to the job that I do, I treasure my family more every day. Because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, all you may have left is your family and a few friends. And I went abroad, as I just described, because for the last 3 decades, my family abroad who are involved in the medical business have assisted me in the management I just described. And in talking to the public about my trip abroad, I did say that to the public. I remember speaking to a reporter in the Express and saying, I'm going to meet my family abroad. I'll be with my family abroad. And on Monday, I go into a clinic. I'm sharing this with the public through the media. And the next thing I know, there are certain elements in our society who had the liberty to slander my family about corruption and what my family is doing abroad and questions I had to answer and all kinds of nastiness. And I simply want to say that such points of views, thank God, are not representative of the vast majority of people of Trinidad and Tobago. And Prime Minister or not, I take umbrage at the fact that I have been so open and forthcoming in anticipation of my test, and there were persons in our society who saw it fit to take the opportunity to slander my family and their professional reputation in California. I'm very, very grateful that I'm able to make that connection with my family who've left this country and have gone abroad, have done well for themselves, and they're in a position today to provide me with that kind of assistance and referral.
Dr. Rowley, good day. Sean Douglas, New State.
Yes, Sean.
On the subject of family, the Emancipation Dinner, we saw a very beautiful picture of your family and a very young, handsome young man.
You sure it wasn't me?
Could have been, too. But we wanted to go, to get any more information. I'm not sure if...
Sean, what information do you want?
So, the young man's name and...
I saw it in the papers.
Sorry?
It wasn't in the papers?
Okay.
In your paper, I presume?
Right. But any, why we didn't see him from before, and where was he?
He was with his mother. How many people in my family you know? I have a large family, you know.
Okay. Well, could you say how large your family is? Could we have any more
Probably about
sons?
Probably about 5. I mean, how many sons?
Yes.
Oh, 2.
2. Okay. Any more
Daughters?
at all?
Daughters?
We may be introduced to sometime.
Well, you never know. No, Sean. Interestingly enough, again, that too was an area of great interest to some people. I've had a life long before I came into public life, right? And before I came into, when is it? I had 2 children before I was married, and then I had 2 after I was married and I came into public life. The second 2 were born after I came into public life. My first daughter was born in 1980. I better stop this, right? I think it's 1987. I came into Parliament in 1986. So I think she was born, 87. She was born in 86. So, these are, again, as Prime Minister, I expect that these are tidbits of interest, but of course it also supplies bile and venom to some people, and that makes their day.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank God for your fine bill of health. But our country could probably, you have come back to find our country alien in certain quarters. certain issues, out there in the public domain.
I was only away for a week, 10 days, so I
but
mean,
you
not much.
kept abreast of what was happening.
Oh, I was very much abreast. I mean, this is 2016.
Certainly, the successful, I put that in inverted commas, road trip by the Minister of Finance and his delegation. And as well, you have what it appears to be continuing protestations by certain sectors of society with respect to their needs or their feeling of disaffection. We can talk about, for example, the fish kill, that's surface, the oil slick. We can talk about contractors' demands. We can talk about the oil field workers' trade unions, call for equity and justice and what have you. What can you say in this regard that would sort of appease such situations? Of course, I've left out the discovery of very large caches of arms and ammunition within recent times. Again, alarming.
Well, what you've just outlined there is Trinidad and Tobago. Let me mention, you started by talking about the Minister of Finance's successful road trip. Again, that was part of the ongoing management of the country's affairs. You may recall in the budget and in the media review, we did indicate that we had a deficit to close, and we'll close it. There was more money being spent than money being earned, and to do that, we had to borrow. We'd borrow on the local market, and we borrow some on the foreign market. The Minister of Finance, I want to congratulate him and his team, the Central Bank and the Ministry of Finance staff, for putting this together, because it takes some putting together, planning it and executing it with precision. And it was very successful in that I understand that the offerings were 3 times as much as we had put out. We went to borrow $1 billion, and we had people subscribing up to over $3 billion. We thought we would have paid a certain interest rate, but because of the great response, we were able to reduce the interest rate. And of course, 0.1% of $1 billion is a lot of money you save. So it was very successful. And to gauge that success, you may want to look against some countries that would have gone out. There's one particular country whose name was on our lips recently, who we visited, who went out on the market and had to withdraw their bond offer because the response was quite different. So when we go out as a little country and we are so successful, at least we can acknowledge that it's not all bad news. And this is a signal to us that we are still in the market. We want to manage our debt, and that is part of the debt financing and debt management exercise that the Ministry of Finance is handling very satisfactorily. You mentioned the armed cash. I wasn't surprised, but I was a little put out by it that even with the efforts we are making both here and in Venezuela, that the criminal element would still try, and we have to understand, we have to expect this. The criminal element is still probing and looking for weak spots to bring into a country what they consider to be marketable items. Arms and ammunition are very marketable in Trinidad and Tobago. And what that shipment should tell us, 2 things. One is that our security services are, in fact, on the job. They were successful on this occasion to get out of the hands of the criminals those items which pose great danger to all of us, not some of us, all of us. Every citizen of this country could think quite justifiably that one of those bullets was for him or her. All of us should be happy that the police and these other security services were able to intercept that. It proves what we are saying all along, is that our borders need to be secured. And at the level of the National Security Council, we are working assiduously to ensure that we do all the things that are required to give this country borders that are secure and an ability to obtain information, because it is information that causes our security services to be able to respond in the way that they have responded. And only today, Cabinet approved a very substantial purchase of equipment after a lot of preparation and work done. Cabinet today approved the purchase of certain equipment for the security services to strengthen our electronic response to these same threats that you just mentioned. You talk about persons who are protesting because they are not getting what they consider to be a fair shake. We have to be cognizant of this, of persons who have come to these conclusions and have some empathy for them, because many of these persons are persons for whom the next pay packet is extremely important because they have such little reserves, and persons for whom their patience might be running out. Because I must admit, and I must say to the population, that as a government we are cognizant of how patient the population has been with respect to those persons who are owed monies and other kinds of things. But thankful to them for being patient, but they can't be patient forever. But we are trying to ensure that we try to make the most of what is available and to commit to ensuring, especially to those persons at the lower end of the income scale, that they get what is due. But the overall picture in Trinidad and Tobago is one of significant reductions. We want our economy to grow. We want people to still feel that there is an economy and a future. We want our young people to know that our country has a future. We want our business community to know that there's a future in manufacturing and a future in doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, we don't carry a conversation that Trinidad and Tobago is about to close its doors. The conversation is, we can't get more from less. There is less now. And for those who are demanding more from less, that is a difficult equation. What we are saying is that where there is less, as the time is now, we try to ensure that there's equity in its distribution order. A lot of what you're seeing now is pent-up aggravation because persons were owed monies from an earlier time. What this government has done and had been made to do was to suppress expenditure to come somewhere within striking distance of our revenue. September 9th, I became Prime Minister of this country. That is what the country's circumstances was. We had, as a government, to bring our expenditure down towards a much lowered tier of revenue. So all of us are in a situation of less to go around, and the government is trying to manage that. There have been no mass layoffs by the government workers in this country. We try to maintain. We've said to the workers, yes, we know you're owed money, but we also know you want to keep your job. And therefore, government reduction of public service jobs was not part of our program, which we said, job first, owed money come after. And we have so far dispensed significant sums in treating with that matter of outstanding payments. But as we go forward, the population would understand that we are not in the same place we were, even when those debts were incurred. Much of what is owed now and which causes the aggravation, debts incurred in an earlier time, and could not and was not paid even when we had more money. Now we have far less money, so it is taking a bit longer to discharge all those debts. And of course, you mentioned the union. I would expect that unions would want to talk about getting more in the new era, but this is an era where we are saying you can't get more from less. What we have to be targeted to do, and the first objective, is to try and preserve the jobs that we have, and then try to grow the economy after we got past 2016. 2016 had been a very difficult year for Trinidad and Tobago, very difficult, and would have been difficult for any government because of the changes of the circumstances. And therefore, when we come to speak to you in the Parliament, the budget is due in a few weeks' time. We will tell you much more of how we have managed the situation, what we have had to do, where we have focused, where we have spent the money, where we have not spent it, and go into 2017 with a clearer picture and more confidence. Thank you very much. See you later. You have one more question, Joel?
I did.
One more question.
Yes, sir. Very quickly. the issue concerning the nine nationals in Turkey, and the concern of Trinidad and Tobago nationals leaving this country, participating in ISIS as head of the National Security Council, are you concerned that not enough is being done to address this issue, or what can be done from this side of the government of Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, the last question is in fact the real question, and that is what can be done. We are doing everything that can be done. And specifically to the 9 people, again, this is an issue that crosses international borders and involves more than Trinidad and Tobago. We are in touch at a number of points, staying in the loop. Our foreign, our missions abroad, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is very much in touch, and we are being the home country of such persons when confirmed. There isn't much we can do without the information and movement abroad. We have a significant amount of our population that are Muslims, that are open to inducement to go abroad and do that, and worse, to be encouraged to commit atrocities at home. So this is 2016. This is the world we live in. And the National Security Council is very aware of these situations, and we, rest assured, we particularly in association with our larger partners in national security are doing what we can do to minimize our exposure and to be alert to the threat that you mentioned. Thank you very much.